Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach, Florida. I am sitting this morning with Maria Palasis, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Lyra Therapeutics, and she's joining us from Boston. Thanks for taking part of this morning.
Thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and we're getting together around the AdvaMed conference happening up in, I want to say up in Canada or Boston, but virtual this year. So that's been a bit of a change for everybody.
Yeah.
Lyra, you head up Lyra Therapeutics, and recently you took that organization public in the very early days of the COVID pandemic up in Boston. And I had saw what a challenge that was in general, let alone in the beginning of a pandemic. So let's jump into that. Tell me about Lyra. Tell me what the technology foundation platform is and maybe where we are to date.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. We did take the company public in the middle of the pandemic. Maybe just to start, we actually flipped our S1 public the first week of March, and then everything shut down in Boston really the next week. And it was touch and go. We thought our plans, will we go public? Will we be able to go public? And each week, we didn't know what the next week would bring. And then finally last week in April, we said, let's go for it. And, it took a lot of courage from our executive team to take that step, and from our board. And we did, and we successfully IPO'd. And it's been transformational. So a little bit about Lyra. Lyra is in the ENT space. We have a product platform that delivers drug to the ear, nose, and throat. And our first product is for patients who have chronic rhinosinusitis. It's sometimes called an unrecognized epidemic. There are, in the US, we estimate, you'll hear numbers like 14 to 30 million patients who have it. We estimate it's 14 million patients, 8 million patients get treated, and half of those fail medical management. And it's a situation of the effective anti-inflammatory molecules are known, they're steroids, but there's not a way to get them deep into the nasal passage where they can have an effect. And what Lyra has done is we've created the small matrix that releases a drug over 6 months in a very consistent way, such that the therapy is getting to where it needs to go. And as a result, we have shown in our phase 1 trial that the patients feel significantly better. So we've been able to demonstrate an impact. So it's a very debilitating condition for which we believe we have a very novel solution.
So this is a combination drug device, or is it fall outside of that?
Yeah, it's a combination drug device. It's delivered via a really small applicator, a couple millimeters in diameter, that goes back into an area called the osteomeatal complex. It's a procedure, so a physician administered drug. It's done in the office setting. And out of the applicator, it self-expands, and it's a sort of a conformal matrix that the patient then doesn't feel. And then that matrix stays in situ. It can adapt to the anatomy, and it releases the drug over the 6 months.
I can imagine first indication being on the ENT side, but such a platform sounds super interesting for drug delivery on an in situ forming material and embedding other drugs in this, whether it's going to be for coronary, peripheral, those hard to get spots, and that time release. We've seen it with certainly the stent business, right?
Yes. And actually, and that's sort of where we started. And these kinds of technologies are difficult to develop, right? They can take many years. And so the platform is fully bioresorbable, it's adaptive, it self-expands, and it releases a drug. So you can see that it's very complicated. We did start developing the platform and applying it to peripheral vascular disease. And as what sometimes can happen is that a field, a market can migrate. And that is what happened in peripheral vascular disease, where the issue of restenosis was a very large problem. And then with drug-eluting balloons and drug-eluting metal stents, the patency rates improved significantly. So at that point, and this is when I first became CEO, and I was at the time CEO of both Arsenal Medical and Lyra, which at the time had a different name. I needed to take the company through a pivot, and it was, it was a challenging time, but we very successfully pivoted from cardiovascular into ear, nose, and throat.
So you've had to do a lot of agile scrambling like most other leaders have over the last 7 or 8 months, and certainly navigating an IPO. Tell me about your leadership team there at Lyra. Love the fact that we've got another strong female CEO in the industry leading the charge. So what can you tell me about Lyra's leadership team and executive team?
So maybe starting with, as it's built over time, right? And as a leader, you look at sort of where your expertise is and areas that you want to fill in. And one of the first places that I believe we needed to fill in, particularly as we were going through this pivot, and pivoting not only from cardiovascular to ENT, but from being a combination regulated as a device to a combination product regulated primarily as a drug. So the first person that I had brought in was the head of commercial, and her name is Corinne Noyes, who comes from a biotech background. So now we had, in the two of us, both the device aspect and also the drug. And we began there. It allowed us to go out and get the funding that we needed. We were able to bring in some very strong capital resources with Perceptive Advisors and RA Capital. And then from there, once we achieved the funding, then we went out and brought in our head of clinical, our head of regulatory, our CFO, and our head of research and development. Mm-hmm. And we're very proud that our executive team is very diverse. It's diverse in terms of the drug and device background, but also in terms of female, male. We're 66% female. And I believe that diversity has really allowed us to be able to deliver.
Wow, so getting a combination drug, device, biotech leadership, device leadership, and 66% female, applause to you and getting that done. As a female and a leader, a CEO, and leading a few organizations, you mentioned Arsenal earlier and Lyra now, and your early career was at Boston Sci, PhD in chemical engineer. What guidance would you give to, let's start with females, young females who have their eyes set potentially on the C-suite? What should they be aware of? How should they look for assistance in getting there? Earning it, of course. But how did you navigate it, and what did you learn along the way?
Well, there's people that help you along the way. So there's a couple of things, and that is certainly having mentors, both female and male mentors along the way, understanding that you don't have all the answers and you're not expected to have all the answers, that it's okay. And being aware that, there's many things that you're not going to know, but you bring the people in around you. And I do think that females are very exceptional at this in terms of going out there and getting information. So that was always very important. Taking risks also, not being, not everybody enters into a job knowing everything. Most people don't. And it means taking a risk. And then as an employer, it's being comfortable we always take risks on people that we hire. And whether it's a male or a female, but being willing to take that risk on people that you bring in to help lead the company.
Mm. You're in a distinct marketplace, having a drug device. It's I guess it would be categorized also as an implant in regards to delivering a drug. Where do you see medtech and health tech in general going over the next 24, 36 months, especially given the heavy digital push going on right now? How might that impact your category? And what do you hope for as we look at probably pivoting where a lot of medtech sits today for access, value, outcomes for the patients?
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts there as far as where medtech is going. I'm sure at AdvaMed there's a lot of discussion about digital medicine and convergence, drug device, consumer health, and medtech is really ideally suited to play in those fields and to contribute with implantables and the ability to sense and then deliver a therapy, whether that therapy is a drug or some other stimulation. The world has turned upside down with COVID-19. Our lives have all changed, and but at the same time, when something so disruptive happens, I believe then the world becomes ripe for innovation. And I truly believe that over the next year or two, there's going to be a lot of innovation that we are going to see. Telemedicine, right, is happening in a way that it hasn't before, and medical device can have a huge role in that. So there's a significant amount of opportunity for medical device and the ability to deliver therapies to patients in a new way. But the other thing that I see that I think is less positive is the consolidation that has just happened in the medtech industry. With Guidant was purchased by Boston Scientific, Covidien, Bard, and as a small company, a lot of the innovation comes from these small companies. And often we depend on the larger companies, the interest from the larger companies. So it does become more challenging when this consolidation happens. And I'd love to be able to see more of these small companies actually advance and be able to continue and form larger companies.
As you look at the med tech industry, and let's even call it health tech these days, because I think that's a very broad sense of what we've got, especially with digital, you're going to be seeing some of these small companies not even get involved in a clearance or an approval on a 510 or a PMA, but bringing in an expertise on the digital side, on the cloud side, that is accretive and amplifying what some med devices do. Your thoughts in general on one of the big giants like an Amazon, Apple, IBM, Google, eventually becoming a med tech or health tech juggernaut over the next 5 years? Any chance of that?
I would say probably not. I don't think so. I really think that medical device, the biology, the engineering, the polymer science, that first and foremost resides in the medical device companies. I would actually expect that the digital component can come into medical device rather than the medical device and the biology coming into like a Google or an Amazon. I think that makes more sense to me. I think that's how it probably could evolve. And I think we'll see, but I haven't really seen. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that, but I really would expect that type of technology finds its way into medical device.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the medical device have the beachfront property, meaning they touch the patient, and that won't go away. I'm always curious about when we get that data off the patient, what are we doing with it? And that is the power curve of those other 4 companies. So it'll be interesting to watch. What are you looking forward to in the AdvaMed event over the next 2 weeks? Anything in particular you're going to be keeping your eyes on in the industry?
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm biased. If you, my whole career has always been convergent to chemical engineering. I did a postdoc in molecular biology, and you make a choice of, are you going to be narrow or broad? And I just love the intersection. So that's what I'll be looking at. The intersection of devices and drugs, of digital medicine, consumer health, and devices. Also, I think that's a very interesting space, and one where medical device companies can play. So that's what I'll be looking for.
I agree, Maria. I think that the passive monitoring on the consumer side has got a place in it. Certainly not a FDA regulated, but raising a flag early on a potential outlier situation with a patient could be worth something, and it doesn't always have to run through the FDA in that regard. Again, raising a flag, not offering a therapeutic or a diagnostic, so to speak. So I appreciate your time. I am looking forward to seeing you virtually at the AdvaMed conference as it takes place over the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. This was a pleasure, and very nice to meet you virtually.
Same. Be safe up there. I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.